The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your land, your family, and your father's household for the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name respected, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Those who curse you, I will curse. All the families of the earth will be blessed because of you." Abram left just as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, all of their possessions, and those who became members of their household in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land as far as the sacred place of Shechem at the oak of Moreh. The Canaanites lived in the land at that time. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I give this land to your descendants." So Abram built an altar there to the Lord who appeared to him. From there he traveled toward the mountains east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and worshipped in the Lord's name. Then Abram set out toward the arid southern plain, making and breaking camp as he went. These are the words of God for God's people. Thanks be to God.
So what is ministry? I mean, what would you say? What would you say is ministry? When I served as the chaplain at Texas Wesleyan University, I had the honor of being an instructor, and also I ended up being the coordinator director for the church internship program for students that were going to be going into ministry. And so the first class, I asked that question: what is ministry? You know, and we get all these answers. Oh, you know, it's a wonderful life of serving God. It's doing this calling. And we go through this great discussion, you know, probably some of the things you would have said. And I said, what if ministry is just a life of being interrupted? And then really for ministry, it's a life of being interrupted. And that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, being interrupted. And you know, I realize that ministry is not the only one. I mean, any of the traditional three professions, ministry, law, medicine, that's a life of being interrupted. I realize plumbers, what's a plumber's life? It's a life of being interrupted. I mean, there are a lot of people that their life is a life of being interrupted. But with ministry, I then, after that, we tell students, you know, there are things that you're interrupted by that will draw you into your purpose and your calling. It just draws you in more. You know, responding to a crisis, being with people at the hospital, you know, other things that draws you in. And then there are things that distract. There are those interruptions that distract. And at that point, you're going to have to make a choice. If you're going to attend to that, or maybe not so much attend to that interruption. And then there are things, aren't there, that we don't have a choice about. I received this wonderful elite invitation in the mail a couple of weeks ago. That's where I'll be tomorrow. If I don't respond to your text or email, you know why. It's a summons for jury duty. So tomorrow morning I will go to the courthouse. I will go to the court I'm assigned to, and I will, you know, and I'm going to do it. I really don't have the option of that. Well, I do, but then there's consequences. You know, it's a summons. Now, I've got this in here where people, I've got to take this with me tomorrow, so will you check with me later and make sure I didn't leave it at the church? Thank you. And then I realized there's even, you know, there's interruption. There's the summons. And then there's something I think is even more. And it's called deployment. And many of you know more about deployment than I do. I really never deployed in my time in the Naval Reserves. But some of you know about deployment. When you're deployed, I mean, you've got to leave everything, right? You're leaving family, you're leaving home, you're leaving your hobbies, you know, you're leaving church, you're leaving things you love and enjoy, and you've got to go to a different place. And you're going with a purpose, right? You have a mission, you have a purpose. Sometimes it's just to have a presence in another part of the world. Sometimes it's for training for a certain scenario. But there's this deployment you leave. So you have interruption, right? Things that interrupt our life, summons type things, deployment things. And today we heard about the call of Abram. Where would you put that? Is his life just simply being interrupted? Is this a summons from God? Is God telling him to deploy? Where would you put that? So we're going to do something just a little different. So I want to look at it. I want to do what we might call maybe kind of a deep dive, look into the story of Abram. It starts there in Genesis 12. Genesis, the book, not the man. Genesis 12. But it starts a new section. We start a new section in the book of Genesis. Genesis 1 through 11 is really like a prologue. We get all of humanity, the things, we get the two creation stories. You get the story of Cain and Abel, and then we end up with Noah. And then you have this little insert about the Tower of Babel, where because people thought that they were so powerful, God does kind of a humility lesson, confuses the languages, divides people, which incidentally is reversed on the day of Pentecost because everybody could understand each other. When God is doing some work, God reverses some of the consequences of our sins. But now it just comes to 12. At the end of 11, we get this little history of Abram. We get some of the ancestry. He comes out of the line from Noah, from one of Noah's sons, Shem, and then Terah, the father. And it says that Abraham married. He takes care of his nephew because one of his brothers died, and he has his other brother, Nahor, and they travel. They're going to leave where they are and go to what's called the land of Canaan. But on the way there, they stop off in Haran and they settle there. They didn't make it all the way. And we have no idea why they stopped. And then, all of a sudden, God calls Abram. And we don't know why it's Abram and not Nahor or Terah. No idea. We do know he's probably wealthy because he has lots of possessions. He has servants. That's all we really know. Sometimes God's call comes without our understanding why. It doesn't really seem logical. God doesn't give the whole story, but sometimes God's call to us comes without the full explanation. And now God speaks to Abram, and then in the new RSV, I want to use that. So if you want, remember the Pew Bible thing? If you want to get that out, it's there right in front of you. It's the one without the musical notes. Okay. Genesis 12, very first book, easy to find. Genesis 12, verse 1. And it says that God spoke to Abram and said, and I'm going to have Pat help me out here. What is the first word? What did God say?
Go.
No. Yeah, in New RSV it does say go. That's not right. You got it wrong. I'm sorry. The Hebrew word is a word that is much more forceful. You got the right word, just the inflection. It would be like go with 12 exclamation points. What does God say? Go. Oh, that was 2 exclamation points. Okay. What does God say? Go! That's what God says. It's got Abram's attention, right? And it says, and then it said that Abram actually went. But God tells him to go. And he's going to the land of Canaan. So let's just put a pin and go for a minute. And he's going to the land of Canaan. Remember where they were originally started out to journey. Where they were originally starting out long ago, before they settled in Haran. They were on their way, and for some reason they stopped. Maybe they got tired. Maybe he says, hey, this is a good enough place. Let's just do it here. Maybe everybody else was complaining, and Terah gave in and said, that's fine. Maybe they put it to a vote. We don't know. But they didn't make the full journey. And God has this place for God's purpose and promise to be fulfilled. And so I have to pause for a moment. It causes me to pause. And I have to ask, is there a time I have stopped short from going all the way into God's promise and purpose? In the 173 years of Belton First United Methodist Church, 1850 to 2023. I wonder, has there been a time we have stopped short? What was the word that God told Abram? Oh.
Go!
Thank you. With 12 exclamation points. What was that word?
Go!
That's right. And he has to go from his country, from his kindred, from his father's house. He has to leave all that, extended family, where they've been. Yeah, and have any of you ever moved? Isn't it fun? Yeah, no. I mean, you know, some of you have moved, had to move across country, right? I mean, he's leaving. And it says that he went. Now, I just want to, it sounds like blind obedience. But I don't want us to just gloss over this too quick, because I think there's more going on there in Abram than what we really get from the story. Because if I can put myself in the story and go, wow, he has to leave all that to go to this place, doesn't even know about, when there's other people living and trying to inhabit this? And can you imagine the struggle? I think there's some struggle going on that we just don't know about. And I know people that are deployed. It's a struggle. When you got to deploy. And leave these things behind. One day when I was under the Naval Air Station Dallas, I decided I had an opportunity to ride along with what's called VR-59. They fly DC-9s. And said, do you want, I said, yeah, I'd love to ride one day. So we went from Dallas to Maryland, to the Naval Air Station there on eastern part of Maryland. And then they were picking up an aviation squadron. They're flying all the way back to the west coast of California, so they could board a aircraft carrier and go on what's called WestPac. It's a 6-month deployment to the Western Pacific. Well, 6 months or longer, depending on what happens. And now when you're doing that, there's not a flight attendant to bring you water and snacks. You got to bring your own. I wish they would have told me that. But I get to visit with some of them, and I sit next to the lieutenant, and just start talking, and he's not very excited about this deployment. He was leaving his pregnant wife at home. The child would be born while he was gone. And his first child, when his first child was born, he was gone. And there's this struggle of duty, his duty as a father, his duty as a husband, but his duty to serve his country and to go where he's ordered to go and deploy. It's not, we think it's blind faith and we should do that, but I want us to acknowledge the struggle that happens. And so when you feel God calling you to a place, sometimes we've got to go on blind faith, but we've got to acknowledge that sometimes there's a struggle. And there's Abram. And what's he told to do?
Go!
Thank you. He's told to go. And it's not just a different place and space, but God says, go, I'm going to bless you so you will be a blessing. You can end up being a blessing to the whole human race throughout the earth, throughout all time, all generations. You can be a blessing. See, Abraham isn't just called to a different place, he's called to a new purpose. Purpose. This is the first purpose that we really have, that we come across in the book of Genesis, in the beginning. Last week we talked about the first commandment, be fruitful. That can be literal, which it was at the time, but we can take it allegorically, figuratively, metaphorically, and talk about fruitful as reproducing God's goodness. But now we have purpose. Be a blessing. Be a blessing. Would you just turn to someone and say, would you be a blessing? Turn to someone else. Will you be a blessing? If you're watching online, Facebook people, ask the YouTube people if they will be a blessing. YouTube people, ask Facebook people, will you be a blessing? Choir, ask the congregation, will you be a blessing? Balcony, ask the choir.
Will you be a blessing?
Congregation, ask the worship staff.
Will you be a blessing?
I hope so. This blessing I love the definition of blessing that I found many years ago. Blessing is the continuous working of God in our daily lives. The continuous working of God in our daily lives. That's what it means to be a blessing. To acknowledge that God is working on our daily lives and to help others, to enable them to experience blessing, to enable someone else to know about, to experience, to appreciate the daily working of God in their life. Turn to someone and say, will you be a blessing? Turn to someone else and say it again. And I think that calling of purpose to Abram goes down to us. It's the legacy. It's the legacy. We are to be a blessing. Down in the fellowship hall, as some of you know, we got this timeline going on, significant events in your life, in the life of the church. And I kind of want to look at them now through the lens and ask, I wonder which one of those events helped people to experience the daily work of God in their lives, and which ones didn't. Because that's the legacy. It's just me. But I think today, in divisiveness that we have, that if we could focus on who we are to be, our legacy, because we have this connection with Abram. I mean, we really do. Now, we're not of the bloodline. We're not Jewish. Well, maybe some of you are. Maybe some of you aren't watching. But we kind of have what I'm going to call the sacred connection. It's a sacred connection that we fully can't explain. Let me try it this way. My wife and I, we have a dog named Rocco. Rocco loves to play fetch. Now, outside is with a tennis ball, and it's got to be with a real tennis ball. Okay, you can't be one of those pet smart dog. It's not good enough for him. But inside, you can do, you do the stuff toy. So this was a new one that he got on Friday. The squeaker has already been surgically removed. The stuffing is coming out. It looks like it snows in the front room, right? And then this is what happens after a while, because this was at Christmas. It was a full toy, right? I mean, this is it. It's just, he still plays it. That's what he does with toys. We also had, before Rocco, we had a dog, Chester, that Jeanette brought into the marriage, a little lost and off. So that's a Chester toy. I don't know if you can see it. He had it for years. It is fully together. There is not one stitch ripped. That's a Chester toy. Okay? Now, Chester, probably 9 or 10 years ago, we had to, he crossed the bridge. Jeanette kept a couple of his toys, and last month, Jeanette said, I think I'm ready to get Rocco one of Chester's toys. Dear, you know what's going to happen, right? Well, the picture, that I just took that the other day. Rocco's been playing with this for a month. And there's some kind of mysterious connection that, in honoring this legacy, that we just can't explain. We have this connection to be a blessing, to help people experience the continuous working of God in their daily lives. Because it's not just about where, but it's about what, and about how. How do we do that? Now, of course, I work on the sermon, so I'm able to think about some of these questions, before you get them on Sunday morning. So I was thinking about how is it to be a blessing, how, and I realized that there's a couple things, and it might just be me, but I'm weird, right? I am not particularly blessed by hypocritical, judgmental things. I mean, that's probably just me. But I discovered that as I looked, when was I really attuned to working of God in my daily life is times that I was trying to enable others to be attuned to the continuous working of God in your daily life. That I found myself experiencing blessing when I was trying to be a blessing and help others experience God's goodness. And that's what we're called to do. First purpose of the Bible is to be a blessing to all of humanity. You get this story in Genesis, it's all of humanity. We focus down on one with Abram, and yet through that, all of humanity again will experience the working of God, the continuous working of God in their daily lives. It comes down to this purpose. Priest, pastor, author, teacher, professor, Barbara Brown Taylor wrote a book several years ago called An Altar in the World. I recommend this book to you, An Altar in the World, Barbara Brown Taylor. In the chapter on the practice of living with purpose, she says, earlier in my life, I thought there was one particular thing I was supposed to do with my life. I thought that God had a specific purpose for me, and my main job was to discover what it was. And this thought heated up while I was in seminary studying to be a priest, where I attended class, drank beer with other students. I went to the wrong seminary. But drank these other students who knew exactly what they would do when they graduated. I did not have a single clue what I would do when I graduated. I did not even belong to a church. So I began asking God to tell me what I was supposed to do. What was my designated purpose? Now, since this was an important prayer, I searched for the right place to pray. After some lackluster attempts by the side of my bed and some cubby hole areas around the seminary, I discovered this fire escape on a vacant mansion next to the seminary. And one night, I crept over there after dark. I stepped over the danger keep out sign, and I tried to climb up with the bolts creaking, my hands holding so tight to the rail that paint is crumbling like cornflakes. But I found this to be a powerful place to pray. I don't remember, I don't think it was right at the beginning. But one night, when my whole heart was open to hearing from God, what I was supposed to do with my life, God said, anything that pleases you. What? I said, what kind of answer is that? Do anything that is pleasing to you as long as you do it belonging to me. And so I decided that whatever I decided to do for a living, it's not what, but about how I did it that mattered to God. That God had given me an overall purpose. And if I wanted to have life of meaning, then I was going to have to apply that purpose in my daily life. Blessed, the continuous daily working of God in our lives. To take and apply that purpose in whatever we do, wherever we do it, but that is how we are to do it. Will you be a blessing